What's up guys, you're watching Li-Fi TCG. I've got a Pauper video for you today on the Tron deck. So in this video I'm going to quickly run through the way the deck is built in the meta currently, the few like flex slots or customizable options that there are within the way that the deck is being built at the moment, and my preferences for those choices. So to start with, the mana base, 12 Tron lands, very standard, no reason to play less than the full set. Then 4 Thriving Isle, just the best 5 color mana fixing option available. It gives you all of the different colors you need to cast the spells that are in the deck. Then 1 Bojuka Bog, 1 Cave of Temptation. Bojuka Bog, very important graveyard hate option, especially in the mirror, just to have the crop rotation target to disrupt any flicker stuff that's going on. Then Cave of Temptation, untapped 5 color mana source, another good crop rotation option. You can also put the counters on your Mulldrifter, things like that, but mostly just as a rainbow land. Then 2 basic islands. Yeah, most of the spells in the deck are blue, so island is the natural choice. And then 2 more tap lands, so new cards from Strixhaven, 1 Prismari Campus and 1 Quandrix Campus. So yeah, these are new cards from the Strixhaven, the new set. They're tap lands, so come to play tapped. This one adds blue-green, this one adds blue-red, and they have the ability 4 and tap scry 1. So before the deck's played 1 or 2 slots on gain lands like Thornwood Falls or whatever the blue-red one is called, I forget the name. So you're not really increasing the number of tap lands in the deck by any more than you were playing before. So you're not like slowing down the mana, and then because this deck can generate a lot of mana in the late game, and it can play that kind of like a slow control game where you try and sit back on Pyroblast and wait to like sculpt your hand before you make a move, the scry ability can be quite strong on these lands as well. So at the moment I'm trying 2 copies of these scry lands, 1 each of the blue-green and the blue-red one. It's possible, for example, that you would cut the blue-green one and play Thornwood Falls again, just so you have the option to crop rotation for life gain if you really have to. Or for example, you could decide that like playing the different colors is in the long run not correct, and you're supposed to play like 2 of the blue-green one. That's another possible option as well. So yeah, that's my configuration for the mana base right now. So in terms of the choices you have, like you pretty much have to play the Thriving Isle and the 12 Tron lands. Some people play 2 Cave of Temptation. I don't think that's correct. I think it ties up your mana too much filtering through it. It's good to have 1, just have it as a 1 clutch rainbow source, and being able to crop rotate for an untapped mana source of any color, but I don't think you want to have more than 1 of it. The Bojuka Bog I think is pretty essential. Like it gives you such a big leg up in the mirror when you have the ability to crop rotate for it. Then some people play only 1 island, and some people play like 3 and like 2 to 3 tap lands, 1 to 3 tap lands rather. So yeah, whether you want to keep playing Thornwood Falls or you like the Campus, whatever, this mix of islands and tap lands that you think is good. But everybody is playing exactly 22 lands, so that's the config I have here as well. So that's the lands. In terms of mana fixing, everybody seems to be playing 2 crop rotations now. I've only got 1 copy here and 1 proxy one. So before I was only playing 1. I think with access to Bog especially, having the second one is pretty good, and just letting you get the Tron online a bit more consistently as well, it seems fine. So 2 crop rotations. And then every single Tron deck you're playing the 8 mana fixing artifacts, the 4 Prophetic Prism and the 4 Bonder's Ornament. Yeah, those 10 cards are all very standard for Tron right now. Then onto the rest of the deck. So in terms of like card draw and selection, 2 Mystical Teachings minimum, 4 Mulldrifter, 4 Impulse. Like all the decks are playing this at a minimum. Like Impulse is just the best early game card filtering, like cantrip spell, just to help you like sculpt your hand to find your Tron pieces. Mulldrifter is like one of the best cards in the deck. It's a flicker target. It's good at 3 mana. It's good at 5 mana. It's a win condition. It's a blocker. It's just like it does everything you want it to. Very strong card. Every version of Tron is playing 4 copies of this. And Mystical Teachings helps you to set up your flicker stuff. Helps you to interact by finding counter spells and removal. Helps protect yourself by finding copies of like fog effects. It does basically everything you need it to. So yeah, every Tron list is playing those 10 card advantage / card drawing spells. Then the flicker package. 2 Mnemonic Walls, 2 Ghostly Flickers, 1 Pulse of Murasa, and 1 Ephemerate. So again, all the Tron decks are playing this minimum. In my last Tron video, I think I had Reaping the Graves instead of Pulse of Murasa, but as I kind of predicted, because Bojuka Bog became a lot more popular now that everybody switched to crop rotation after the map ban, having your raised dead effect be uncounterable, effectively like Reaping the Graves is with Storm, is not very useful, because no matter how many copies of Reaping the Graves you have, they all get counted if your opponent exiles your graveyard anyway. So everybody's on Pulse of Murasa now because the life gain is relevant. It can return lands, which is also a bit more relevant now because the Ponza decks are more popular. Green mana is slightly easier to make because you want to commit your Thriving Isle onto green for your crop rotations and like your fog spells as well. So green's easier to make, plus you also have, well, I guess you have Bojuka Bog and Quandrix Campus, so that cancels out. But yeah, the Pulse of Murasa is in all the lists now. Nobody's playing Reaping the Graves anymore. So yeah, these 6 cards are basically mandatory. Then what's next? So in terms of like defensive options, everybody's playing 2 Moments Peace minimum. 1 Abrade is in all the lists as well. And then usually 3 more defensive spells like this. But I'll get into that when I talk about the flex slots more. So the 2 Moments Peace is in all the lists, and the Abrade as well. So those are stock. Then everybody's playing 3 counter spells. Not literal counter spell, but 1 Prohibit and 1 Unwind are really common in most of the lists. So a Prohibit is just like the most flexible counterspell. The deck, some people are playing actual counterspell, but I don't like it. I think double blue is a little bit hard to make. A Prohibit counters most things with either the hardcast mode or with the kicker. So Prohibit's in most of the lists. Unwind also in most of the lists. The untapped 3 lands is really strong, obviously, because with the way that your mana base works, that often accelerates your mana, and then once you have that extra mana, you often have stuff to spend it on, whether that's flickering your cards more, or flashing back Mystical Teachings, or activate your Bonder's Ornament, or even now it can untap your Campus land to get a free scry. Having this kind of spell, like Negate kind of effect almost on a 3 mana counter spell, feels kind of expensive, but it really provides a big boost if you resolve it. So the Unwind and the Prohibit are in most of the lists. And then, like I said, basically all the lists are playing a 3rd copy of a counterspell as well. Usually that's either Dispel or Exclude. So I have Exclude main deck. I think it's good that it gives you a way to interact with Dinrova Horror on the stack and the mirror in game 1, which can be pretty important. And I just like having the better value option as a Mystical Teachings target in game 1. Pretty much whether you decide to play Dispel or Exclude main deck is like personal preference, but whichever one you don't play main deck, I would also play in the sideboard anyway, so it's not a huge commitment either way. But yeah, I have the 3 counter spells are basically mandatory with the Exclude, Unwind, Prohibit. Then so there are 3 more so basically how most of the lists are built is you have 3 more defensive spells, 2 kind of win conditions, and then another like card advantage-y draw kind of effect. So in terms of the defensive cards first, I have 1 Weather the Storm, 1 Tangle, and 1 Cannonade. So Cannonade is not essential to play main deck, but you do need to play it in the 75, so if you don't want to play 1 main, you do have to play 1 side. It becomes less important to have it in your main deck if you're playing 1 Rolling Thunder as one of your win conditions, because they have a similar overlap in terms of their function. Like, of course, you can't Teachings for Rolling Thunder because it's a sorcery, but it does perform that role in terms of like a big damage effect that can kill multiple creatures. But I'm not playing Rolling Thunder, which is why I think having Cannonade main deck is more important. Usually another Fog effect is solid. Most people are playing either the Third's Moments piece is the most common option, or you play 1 Stonehorn main. I'm just playing 1 Tangle just because I'm like having the flexibility of being able to Teachings for it. But there's a decent chance this should just be the Third Moments piece instead. And then the Weather the Storm, again, like Fiery Cannonade, if you don't play it main, you have to play it in the side, I think. And I think it's totally reasonable to play it main, like it's still good versus the Delver decks and things like that. And again, if you don't play the Weather the Storm main, then you pretty much have to play like either a Stonehorn or another Fog effect anyway, I think. So it's not like you're changing the like positioning of the deck too much anyway. So yeah, so I like the these 3 cards in the main deck. Then for the win conditions I'm playing, most lists are playing 2. You have to pick 2 out of 3 of Rolling Thunder, Dinrova Horror, or Compulsive Research. And as I already explained when I was talking about Fiery Cannonade, I'm not playing Rolling Thunder. I think it's too clunky, and the mana cost is too difficult. I much prefer having the ability Dinrova Horror to deal with any permanent. It's super flexible, and then I like having Compulsive Research as well because it's less clunky. Just having it in the deck as kind of a divination effect is totally fine. And then for those of you who aren't familiar, you might be wondering how this is a win condition. It's just like a card draw spell. The Compulsive Researcher can target your opponent. So in games where you're looping Mnemonic Wall with like Tangle, for example, so you're preventing all combat damage to yourself, and you're using Mnemonic Wall with your Ephemerate and your Flicker to return your counter spells, so your opponent can't really do anything, they can't attack you, they can't resolve anything important. You don't have to do anything to win the game, you just assemble all that lock, and then as the game progresses, you just start targeting them with Compulsive Research, and then eventually they deck out before you. So yeah, I prefer playing that configuration of the Horror and the Compulsive Research main and no Rolling Thunder. There's no specific reason why you couldn't play all three, the Thunder and the Research and the Dinrova Horror main, but I just don't think it's necessary, and it's hard to find space. I'm not a huge fan of the card Rolling Thunder. I don't like to play it in my decks, really. But yeah, that's the 2 win conditions and the 3 extra defensive spells that I think the deck probably should be playing in the main deck. And then the last card, like I said, this is like another card draw like consistency option. So here I have 1 extra copy of Mnemonic Wall, and I quite like playing 3 copies of Mnemonic Wall for quite a while. I think that's a pretty solid choice. A big part of your late game is assembling 2 Mnemonic Walls with the Ghostly Flicker to keep buying back all your counter spells and your fogs and things. So obviously if you have only exactly 2 copies of Mnemonic Wall in your deck, that's relatively tricky to do. So having the 3rd Mnemonic Wall seems pretty important. But I could definitely consider playing 3rd Mystical Teachings instead of this. And that's what some people are doing at the moment. So yeah, so either the 3rd Teachings or this 3rd Mnemonic Wall I think is the good choice for the last slot in the main deck. So yeah, that's the full main deck. I'll just quickly lay that out for you again, because I like to look at the pretty foils anyway. So the creatures, spells, yeah. So that's 1 Dinrova Horror, 4 Mulldrifter, 3 Mnemonic Wall, 2 Crop Rotation, 4 Impulse, 2 Ghostly Flicker, 1 Abrade, 1 Exclude, 1 Prohibit, 1 Unwind, 1 Pulse of Murasa, 1 Ephemerate, 2 Moment's Peace, 1 Tangle or 3rd Moment's Peace, 1 Fiery Cannonade, 1 Weather the Storm, 1 Compulsive Research, 2 Mystical Teachings, then 4 Bonder's Ornament, 4 Prophetic Prism, 2 Island, 1 Quandrix Campus, 1 Prismari Campus, 1 Bojuka Bog, 1 Cave of Temptation, 4 Thriving Isle, and the 12 Urza lands. That's the main deck. Then onto the sideboard. So for Pyroblast is very stock. Some people are playing 5, which is an option, but I think 4 is probably enough. But 4 at minimum seems to be the common choice. Very important versus the Mirror, and there's things like Delver as well. 4 Hydroblast. It's common to play at least 2 of this. 4 might be a little bit excessive, and I'll get into why, but you do need quite a bit of help versus things like Burn, and it's not so bad versus like Affinity, for example, either. 2 Stonehorn Dignitary. This is very stock. Just a little bit of extra help to shore up the matchup versus the aggro decks. You could play more copies of like a green fog spell in your sideboard if you wanted, like there's space to play more Moment's Peace or more Tangle, for example, things like that. But Stonehorn is good in post-board games because it blocks Flaring Pain and it stops Ulamog's Crusher from attacking you, so the Annihilator doesn't trigger, whereas the green fog spells don't protect you from either of those things. So in the post-board games, Stonehorn Dignitary becomes a lot stronger. Then 1 Cast Down. This is extremely stock. You want to have a Teaching's Target that can remove any creature. Pretty self-explanatory. It's basically mandatory. 1 Ancient Grudge. This is pretty close to mandatory as well. Some people skimp on this and play like Gorilla Shaman instead. I think you can play Gorilla Shaman in addition to this, which some people do as well. But I think Ancient Grudge is pretty essential, just so you can fight over Bonder's Ornament in the matchups where that's relevant. Having the extra ways to do that beyond the 1 Abrade in the main deck is pretty important. So 1 Ancient Grudge. It also helps you kill relics if that's what your opponent's plan is versus you. 1 Dispel, like I said, if you're not playing this card main deck, I think it's important to have 1 in the 75, so put it in the sideboard instead. Then 1 Negate. I just think this is like a very flexible, solid card. Some people playing a main deck as well, which I think is reasonable. Like you bought it in versus like the Lead, the Stampede, the Winding Way decks that does stuff in the Mirror. It counters like land destruction spells versus the Ponza decks. So yeah, pretty solid. So that's the reason why 4 Hydroblast might be too many, because once you have like Dispel and Negate in your sideboard as well, like you already do have a lot of stuff to bring in versus burn spells, things like that. So if you wanted to fit space for an extra sideboard card, what I would do is trim 1 Hydroblast. I think that's totally reasonable. Then the last sideboard card. So what I have sleeved up is kind of like a pet card. It's a bit of a joke. It's 1 First Sphere Gargantua. So this is like a big Phyrexian Rager with Unearth. The fun thing about this card in this deck is that when you unearth it and you flicker it, it doesn't stay exiled forever. It just comes back and then it remains on the battlefield. So you cast it. If your opponent counters it or kills it, then you unearth it and you flicker it. Then if it dies later, you can unearth it again, then flicker it again, and it just stays around forever, basically. So that's like a cool trick, and I really like the design, like the art, everything about this card. It's one of my favorite cards in Magic. But I don't really think that plan really helps you beat anything that your deck isn't already equipped to handle anyway. It's nice that you have this kind of like big finisher thing that doesn't get Pyroblasted, which is one of the weaknesses of Dinrova Horror, but I don't really think this is like a necessary card to play. So instead, for this last slot, what I would want to use is possibly Inside Out. And you might think, like, why would you play Inside Out? You don't have any like Tireless Tribe or whatever to combo with it. But one of the most important things that it does is so if you're not familiar with it, it's a hybrid blue-red and 1 mana, so converted mana costs 2. Switch target creature's power and toughness until end of turn, draw a card. It's an instant. So the reason why that card is good for this deck is because effectively what the text of that card is destroy target creature with no power, draw a card. That's very, very strong versus the Walls deck, which is one of the worst matchups for Tron right now. So that's a totally defensible card to use, and that's what some people are using right now. Another comparable option that I think is reasonable, but I haven't seen anybody try yet, is Crookclaw Transmuter. So what that is it's a blue and 3 for a 3/1 flying bird wizard. It has flash, which is good because obviously you can like hold up mana for it on your opponent's turn, but also because you can search it with mystical teachings. And when it enters the battlefield, it has the same effect as Inside Out, except you don't draw a card. So enter the battlefield, switch target creature's power and toughness or end of turn. So the reason why that might be better than Inside Out, first of all, is because it's a win condition. Like, you tutor it up with teachings, you flash it down, you kill one of their 0 power guys, and from there you can start attacking for 3, and you kill them in a few turns. The other thing is that, of course, that because you have Ephemerate and Ghostly Flicker and things like that in your deck, if you flicker the Crookclaw Transmuter, it enters the battlefield again, you can destroy more creatures. So I think that might be an okay option as well. The other thing that I think might be a reasonable sideboard card is Gut Shot. So, because not only is that a reasonable choice versus decks that have a lot of 1 toughness creatures like elves, fairies, for example, like the Spellstutter Sprite decks, but versus those Wars decks, they're also very reliant on both Korean Ranger and like Llanowar Elves and things like that. So the Gut Shot is a solid choice there too, I think. So for those last few slots, that's probably where I would look. You can experiment with this First Sphere Gargantua if you like to try it, but I don't think it really does anything too important. Yeah, I'd rather have a look at more interaction for those like creature combo decks. So whether that's the Inside Out or the Transmuter or Gut Shot, something like that. But in terms of the sideboard, there are a lot of common choices, so like the 4 Pyroblasts, the 2 Stonehorns, the Cast Down, and the Ancient Grudge. Like 2 Hydroblasts, the Dispel, and then either like the 3rd Hydroblast or the Negate. Yeah, I think I would even confirm like the 3rd Hydroblast, and then you can decide between like the 4th Hydroblast or the Negate, and then you have one or two more cards after that. This is probably how I would build the sideboard. So a lot of people do play a Gorilla Shaman in the sideboard just so you can have like a trump card versus affinity, basically. I don't know if that's necessary, but it's definitely something you should consider. And then apart from that, some people play like Silver Bullets versus other different matchups, like they play a Serene Heart to beat Vocals or something like that. I think that's a fine choice, especially if you play in like a local paper meta where you know you're going to play against a deck like that. Yeah, you have any of those like Silver Bullet cards, like, yeah, and you can think of like those weird other cards that some people play. Like, nobody really plays stuff like Serrated Arrows or like Circle of Protection blue or green anymore, even though you could defensively do that now still if you wanted. But the online metagame doesn't really seem to be warranting that kind of decision right now, so nobody is doing it. But it's good to have those ideas like in the pocket for like one day when you think that it could come up again. So yeah, that's my overview on the deck. I hope that gives you the understanding of like the way to understand the way to build it. Like if there are tweaks you want to make, like you understand the places where you can like change things and put your own spin on it, or like tweak it for your own metagame, and which things you kind of have to keep the same. It's a pretty fun deck to play. It gets a lot of stigma because of the like play patterns of the flicker loops and things, but it plays a lot of like unique cards. You have a lot of decisions throughout the game. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting to play, and it's not so dominant in the format anymore either because of the new Cascade decks. So yeah, definitely a cool deck. If you have any of your own sweet like sideboard cards that you like to use or anything like that, make sure you comment down below, let me know. This has been Li-Fi TCG, Pauper Tron signing out.